Hi, I'm Garm1, and this is Midgardia's cool crowdfunding show. I'm here today with Mark Greenberg. How's it going?
Hey, doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. You're here today to talk about Necropolis. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So, I have introduced myself recently to the world of Kickstarters. I actually did one about 2 years ago for Frog God Games called The World of the Lost Lands, which is this monster book. It was my first experience actually as a professional in this industry. Like a lot of people, I spent many, many years as a consumer. I was buying stuff and playing, but I had the opportunity a few years back to move on to the other side and do some writing. And so, first project was World of Lost Lands, and now the new project is Necropolis, which is the newest adventure. We think we started. We've been live for I don't know a week, six
Uh,
days, I forget, something like that.
yeah, something like that.
Um, and I think we're about $60,000 right now, so we're like 400% funded. But we want more because there's lots of cool stretch goals that we want to try to reach. So we're hoping to get both our old friends and new people to come in and take a look. So Necropolis is it's more than just an adventure. I mean, it really is. It's sort of like I wouldn't call it like an adventure path, but it's almost like a source book. Um, Plus adventures. It was originally written actually by Gary Gygax. Yesterday, as we are recording, was Gary Gygax Day. It would have been his 83rd birthday. And he wrote this originally for, it was Dangerous Journeys, his system, back in like 1992. Sometime later after that, the folks at Necromancer Games, which is part of Frog God now, bought Necropolis and reissued it. They updated it at that point for D20. So it's been out there for a long time, and it's been sort of sitting there. And I think the decision was this is a classic adventure. It was one of Gary's last ones that he published, and it'd be a lot of fun to update it for current systems. So it is going to be issued for 5e, of course, as well as Swords and Wizardry, which is sort of the Frog God supported OSR system. And so, about a year or so ago, Bill Webb, who one of the owners of Frog God, said, "Hey, Mark, what's your next project?" I said, "I don't know. What do you want me to do?" He said, "Well, I got this thing." And I didn't quite know what I was in for at the time, um, because it's big, but it's also there's a lot of it that sort of feels 1992 or 2002 about it, and that needed a lot of updating and work. Not just to change the system. So this is not just a conversion. It really is, but it's also not like it also isn't like somebody said, "Hey, take the word Necropolis and dream up an adventure," either. The maps are basically the same, although I want to talk about that in a minute. The maps are basically the same. The adventure outline is basically the same. The characters are basically the same, but some of the motivations have changed, some of the background has changed, encounters have changed. Um, there's a lot that Gary did that was a little bit sort of lead you by the nose. DM manages the party, which just doesn't work anymore. And so I tried to update that and create more motivations and provide hints for the players so they can figure out what to do next, but have it work if they potentially go the wrong way for a while. So it was a really it's I don't want to call it a reimagining because it's not, but it is a heavy revision. If you've played the old one and you think you know what's going to happen next, you very well may be wrong. So it's going to be a hardcover in the U.S. Unfortunately, overseas, it's going to be issued POD because there isn't an economical way to get a hardcover shipped overseas that doesn't result in its destruction. It just isn't possible. So I would encourage anybody who's not in the U.S. who wants a copy, find a friend in the U.S., have them back the Kickstarter for you, and the next time you go see the friend, pick up your copy. I think that because the hardcovers, if you've seen the Frog God hardcovers, they're phenomenal. I mean, they're built to last. Library stitched. They're not going to fall apart, and that's what this one's going to be. We got lots of full color art that has been commissioned. And getting back to the maps, two phenomenal cartographers, Robert Altbauer and Alyssa Faden, have done the maps. And if you're a friend of Alyssa's or you follow her on Twitch or YouTube, she's been streaming live as she's been working on the map. And it is insane. The level of detail is absolutely insane in this map. If anyone playing it's going to have an absolute blast. So that's the background.
I'm looking at the art. It's on the Kickstarter page, which there is a link to below. It is real good. Like, I've played a lot of D&D with a lot of wildly varying quality maps, and I'm okay with just black and white maps. But like full color, tons of details, it really adds something. It really immerses you. You know.
Yeah, and the maps in particular, since there's part of the Kickstarter, we have options for virtual tabletop. So if you use Fantasy Grounds, everything is, there's a pack that you can get that gives you everything, line of sight, everything, it's all going to work. If you don't use Fantasy Grounds, though, there's another option where you get, the maps in PDF with layers and all the other information you need to use other virtual tabletops. But it's the optimized one is for Fantasy Grounds since it's for 5e. But that lets you really use the maps, and they are so detailed that it really is kind of nuts. Alyssa is out of control sometimes when she makes these maps. And the artwork, I'll tell you, one of the weird things, and surprisingly, one of the most enjoyable things about switching sort of from the consumer side to the production side. Yeah, I was a DM most of my life. And I think most DMs, we all want to publish our own works. We want to write, because that's what we are. We're sort of frustrated authors, and we do that for our friends. The biggest change between what I used to do and what I do now is I actually get to take my written words and give it to an artist or a cartographer, and then it comes back and it's professionally done. I can do a pretty decent map. I'm a stick figure kind of artist. I'm horrible. And for me to come up with sort of this idea for art, and then I'd send it to Casey Christopherson, who's our art director at Frog God, and he'd ask me a bunch of questions, and I would, I gave him sketches or I gave him all the details, and he'd figure the right artist out, and then a week later I'd get in my inbox this image. And it's a phenomenal experience as a creative writer to be able to effectively partner with artistic talent, whether it's the cartographers or the artists, and make something that's much more immersive than I could do on my own when I was just DMing. So just had an absolute blast with that. And I'll say, especially with Alyssa, there are times I went on her Twitch channel while she was doing it online, and it was like I'd comment, it's like, oh no, you got that room wrong, or take a look, and it was actually a very collaborative experience. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I get to work with artists sometimes for some of the things I do for my other gig, working with 2 Minute Tabletop. Every once in a while, I'm just like, hey, I need a guy who's been possessed by a puppet on his hand. Can somebody do that for me? And like 2 days later, I have a guy with like evil Kermit the Frog on his hand, and I'm like, nice.
Yep, I wish I could do that kind of stuff, but I mean, the talent that's out there working in this industry really is amazing. And anyone who takes a look at the Kickstarter page, you'll see it. Just some of this stuff is just to die for.
Yeah, and it's years and years of intense skill building to get all that,
Yep.
all that working. So I'd like to go back a little bit to you mentioned some revisions to the module compared to the original. Can you elaborate further on that? Like, is it just plot or?
Yeah, I mean it varies. I mean, I'll tell you right now that probably if you compared the prior version to what I did, my guess is you're going to find almost not a single sentence that hasn't been touched, revised, tweaked, changed in some way. Some of it was just clarifying. There were some rooms I had a hard time understanding what was going on, and I just decided to pick something. Some of it was, I'd say, the older style sometimes, and not always, but this one in particular has a little bit of a do A first, do B first, or do B next, then do C, then do D, then do E. And there's sort of advice somewhere in the book that Gary wrote that basically said if the party tries to veer off script, it's your job as the DM to put them back on script. And I'm not a big fan of that. I think that um, the DM should not be intervening with the party's actions, except to the extent that the in scenario means that something should happen at some particular time. That being said, there is an aspect to this adventure that you got to do certain things before you do other things. It's the old fashioned, you got to find something, and if you don't have X, you can't open Y. So there is a lot of that in here, and so I couldn't sort of let it be completely freeform. But instead of sort of demanding that the GM figure it out, I tried to build in motivations and clues so the party can figure it out on their own and will have the motivations to do the right thing. So there were some overarching changes to try to reflect more party autonomy and some ability to maybe go the wrong way for a while and then eventually figure out that you missed something and find your way back. That there's more of that. Some of it was changing encounters. I felt that some of it was just because a D20 encounter doesn't necessarily translate to 5e, and I had to change things to make that work better. There were some locations where for those who've read Gary's work, he was fond of some of these traps where there's no real way to figure out the right answer other than experimentation. The example I will give is like of a the party finds itself in a room, the door locks behind you, you can't find a way out, and there's a lever. If you push the lever up, it turns out the door opens. If you push the lever down, everybody in the room suffers a point blank, fireball or disintegration. And there's no way to figure out which is which. You just have to pick. I'm not a big fan of those. So I tried to change those to where there's clues or hints. Or if I couldn't do it, I just changed the encounter. There was at least one room where I could not figure out how the party would ever figure the right way to go. I mean, I looked at it, and I finally talked to somebody who had play tested it before the prior version. I said, look, I just got to ask you, I don't know how you get out of this room, and he said, well, here's what we did. Or I think he was DMing it. So, well, here's what the party did. I said, yeah, but Gary's text specifically says that doesn't work. And he's like, yeah, well, it has to work. Otherwise, you can't find your way out of the room. so I figured, okay, then. So I totally changed that room. I changed into something else. There are a couple other places that I felt were a little repetitive. Gary loves teleportation. The infamous teleportation where you're walking down a corridor and you're teleported into another corridor that looks identical, so you don't know that you're 3 levels away from where you started. So your mapping is totally screwed up. Gary had a lot of teleportation, and I felt that it was overused. So I kept some of it, sorry, but I changed other rooms completely. There's one room that I completely redid. So it's a whole spectrum of changes that I think makes it makes it a little more modern in sort of how we play the game. But I'll be honest with you. I mean, I've been playing this game forever, and that's how I played it back when I was many years ago. So calling it modern may be a bit of a misnomer, but it's just changing how the game runs, but also trying to create more interesting, exciting encounters. So if somebody's played this thing before and they just decide to wander into it and say, I know what's going to happen in this room, you very well may be dead wrong. And I emphasize the word dead. So This is a tough. Gary intended this to be a tough challenge for both higher level characters and skilled players, and I tried to stay true to that, without it being, this isn't a meat grinder where you can't win. But even if you've got fairly high level characters, if you're not thinking, if you're not spending the time, thinking about what's going on, you very well could end up in a TPK, um, you know, for no good reason other than you just blundered into something. So it was fun trying to create that kind of a challenge, especially for 5e, because I think 5e does make it more challenging than older versions, for characters, for the players to really feel in peril.
Yeah.
And I think that was something I wanted to make sure was there, but realistically, not just turn it into something where, oh, this happens and there's no save. Sorry, that's no fun either. You want to stick within the rules and try to do what's fair, and let the players, do the best they can.
Right.
So that's the kind of stuff that probably got changed the most.
Yeah. That makes sense. There's definitely a different set of expectations nowadays.
I think that's right. Although I also think sometimes we overplay that, because I know what expectations I had back in the day, and I'm pretty old school. But I sort of expected the same thing. I expected adventures to be fair. I expected there to be a chance to solve the problem. I expected that creativity would be rewarded. Thinking outside the box. Um, all of that should be something that you get credit for. And I spent most of my life as a DM. I didn't actively play for really most of my gaming career. Um, but when I have, I really started to appreciate, you do ultimately form a bond with your characters. You have to accept the fact that they could be killed or there's no point in playing, but you also don't want to feel like, I've spent all this time on this character and then, lo and behold, it dies for no good reason. That's no fun either.
Yeah, every time I'm in a campaign, I usually tell the DM at some point, like, I don't mind my character dying as long as it's at least kind of cool, or if I really
Right.
deserved it.
Exactly. And I think this is an adventure that it kind of plays to that. What you're getting into going, from the beginning. I mean, the way for the old school folks, the way it was originally described by some was Village of Hamlet followed by Tomb of Horrors. And I know Tomb of Horrors has a lot of bad bad reputation these days, in some areas. Um, and I tried to make sure that while this is just as deadly as Tomb of Horrors in many ways, it's fair. If you're in a room and you think about it, you ask for, you look for clues, you use magic in creative ways, you'll find your way through. You still may die in the end because combat is combat, and you might roll a lot of ones, and the DM might roll a whole bunch of 20s. That happens. But the point isn't that you will win if you do a good job. But the point is you've got a good shot at winning. If you do a good job, you don't have much of a shot if you're sort of just saying, I blunder into the next room and I didn't bother to check for traps. It's kind of like, okay, sorry.
I'm probably screwed then.
10-foot poles are your friend.
Ah, yes, the classic.
Absolutely. I always wondered how some people walk around with 10-foot poles. It's like, how cumbersome would that be? Like constantly like having to roll dex checks because you trip on something or you knock something over. But
I know some editions
anyway,
say that they telescope, like they fold in and out, but
right. I mean, in theory they should, but I have a suspicion that telescoping poles were not invented until probably the 20th century. So it's a little bit of an anachronism. But then probably walking around with 10-foot poles is anachronistic too. So,
yeah,
but you know, all kidding aside, your rogue has the ability to check for traps. Might be a good thing to have the rogue do that before you open the door, or
yeah.
not. Whatever.
You'll regret it when the DM asks which hand you're using.
that's or my favorite. Now tell me where everybody is standing exactly when he does that.
Yep.
Okay, and then you pull out the ruler and go, okay.
Hey, what's your guys' marching order again? So
Oh,
so Necropolis covers not just the titular Necropolis itself, but also some information about the Triple Kingdom of Kemet. Can you tell me a little
right,
bit
right.
about that?
So this is set in the world of the Lost Lands, which is kind of fun actually building something off of the book I did earlier. Kemet is probably not a big surprise. Uh, the Lost Lands equivalent of Egypt. Um, Kemet is in fact sort of an old archaic name for Egypt, and it's set in the continent of Libanos, which is not where most of the existing Lost Lands stuff that has been published is located. So it's sort of the other continent far to the east. Um, and there's information in the World Lost Lands about it. So if you have that book, you'll be able to read about it. What we did was we added more stuff into this that would help a DM play potentially in the region. So, because you may be coming from Akados, the other continent, and you may have to travel here, or you may not be anywhere near Kemet and have to travel. So having some background information about the country is invaluable. So there's appendices that have information. There's some history that's summarized, and there's a quite a bit that would enable a DM to sort of use it as a little bit of a regional source book. That isn't really its point, but it's available for that, and it can be used for that. List of names, common names, for example, are in there. So you need to come up with an NPC quickly. You can go look at the name, and there it is. You need to do another tomb. Well, there's a table of tomb dressing, just like it was in the original, DMG. So you need to figure out what some room is. You can, it can help you. It help do a lot of the creation. The adventure itself begins in a village nearby, and you need to role play. One of the things I like about this adventure is it's not just, combat oriented. It's not just tricks or traps. You begin in a village. You need to learn. There's a lot to learn, and there's a lot to be learned, and there's friends to be made, and some enemies to be discovered, of course, in the town. And you don't know who is who, and it takes role playing. So there's some active role playing involved, especially at the beginning, which I think really helps get the players sort of mentally into the environment that's different. It's not your standard Middle Ages European environment. It's different, but it's also not something completely unknown that you've never experienced. Most of us understand Egypt. And I will say one of the things that impressed me the most in many ways when you read the original book, and I tried to preserve this, is Gary clearly did a lot of research into Egyptian mythology. And it shows in the book, it shows in the adventure, and that has all largely been retained. And I actually, in a few places, had to do some research on myself because I decided to change things and wanted to make sure I was at least reflecting some of what Egyptian mythology would say. I mean, obviously, it's not intended to be exactly Egyptian mythology. It's the Lost Lands version of it. Um, uh, so you've got role playing, you've got exploration, you've got overland travel. You may camp out in the wilderness. There is then some other buildings to explore. I don't think it's a spoiler. There's something called the Temple of Osiris, because I think we refer to that in the Kickstarter page. And then there's a necropolis, which is a gorge filled with tombs to explore, but you're looking for one in particular. And so you've got all this material. I would guess, based upon my playtest experience, if you play with your friends once a week, you've got months worth of gaming out of this book. If you try to just plow through it, A, you're going to miss half the fun of it, and B, you're probably going to miss half of the things you need to do to win in the end, and so you will simply die because if you try to go straight from point A to point Z and forget everything else, not only have you sort of defeated the purpose of the whole adventure, you will lose. You're just not going to make it. So there's a lot you need to learn and gain information about and things to discover. So it really is. It's it's hard to use the word epic, but it's pretty damn epic. It really is. Um, it's also your standard Egyptian mummy story in many ways, right? We've all seen those. So there's a lot of that still there as well, but it's done in an interesting and different way, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So if you take your time and go through, it'll take you a couple of months. If you blunder your way through and try and smash through everything, it'll take years.
Well, no, you'll simply have to instead pretend that what you're doing is a video game and just keep going back to your save point because you're just going to keep dying and you're going to have to go keep retrying it over and over again until you make it through. Yeah, I mean this is designed for um, pretty good players who are being thoughtful, and frankly, also a pretty experienced DM. I wouldn't pick this up. This would not be the first adventure I would try to run if I'd never run a game before. It's going to be a challenge. There's a lot to keep track of, and I think there's a lot of places where and it's interesting because when I write my own adventures, when I'm a DM, I'm writing for my party, I'm writing for my friends. I kind of know what they're good at. I know what they're not good at. I know what they like. I know what they don't like. You know, I don't know what you don't like or what you like or what any of the other readers like. So, I think any good DM is going to want to look at this and might say, you know what, something isn't going to work, or I want to tweak this, or I want to tweak that. Because that's just the nature of an interactive role-playing game, I think. So I think that, and this is one that may require more because it is so challenging and because so many of the things are interrelated. You can't just easily change things on the fly if you're not really, solidly comfortable with what, the how the game is supposed to progress. So anyway, yeah.
Cool. Yeah. That all makes sense. And like you said earlier, the art is beautiful. Everything looks. It sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think we've got a lot of opportunity. I mean, there's you can play online using the VTT. We've got virtual tabletop options, so you've got that, or you can play with the book, and the Frog God books last forever, so you'll be able to open it up on the table and not worry about pages coming out. If you back at I think the three highest tiers, we have a limited collector's edition GM screen, which is not available as an add-on. So you got to sort of peg at one of the higher ones. And I actually just finished my proposed design for it that I submitted for review. It doesn't like regurgitate 5e stuff. It's all stuff that is helpful to playing this particular game, things that the DM would otherwise potentially have to go back and refer to. You don't have to refer to it; it's right there in front of you. And I think that will be. It isn't necessary, obviously. You never have to have a screen except something. You can have a piece of cardboard to hide your notes if you really want. But I think for running it will be helpful, and it's going to have that phenomenal artwork on the back of it. I think it's the big long scene with with the pyramids in the back that you can see on the Kickstarter that is just phenomenal. So that's something that if people are interested in, they can do that. But if you play online, there's VTT options, and there are stretch goals that we're continuing to knock down that will give some more maps that you can use for random encounters too. And hopefully we'll hit all these stretch goals and we'll end up having to come up with new ones. That's my dream.
Excellent. Is there anything else you'd like to highlight about the project while you're here?
Uh, Yeah, not that I could think of. I mean, I just think I think people will enjoy it. There's a lot of things, little things we've added. Like I said, the art is great, the cartography is great. There's a player's handout map that we've had Cave Geek is doing that is going to be really neat. I'm really happy with that map. I've already seen an early version of it. We're in really good shape. This is not a Kickstarter that there is danger of non-performance. Manuscript is done. Actually, this afternoon, I was waiting for one more bit of information, and it's going to layout today. So there is not a question of this thing not performing. All of the art that you've seen is in and final. So we're rocking and rolling on this one. We just need as many backers as we can, because you do all this creative work. I want people to enjoy it. I want people to play this thing. All of the play testers I had seem to enjoy it. The folks who've had to read it internally for editing or whatever, everybody seems to think it's really good. Alyssa, the cartographer, and she added a lot to it, has commented on it. So I think people will really enjoy it. This is not one you need to worry about non-performance. Our stretch goals are not gonna, we're not creating stretch goals that are going to keep us from getting this thing delivered. So people should be able to feel confident backing. The more backers we get, the more stretch goals. What I'd love to do is have to come up with a few more. We want to offer as much as we can, but hopefully we'll see. We've got a couple, like 3 weeks still, I think. So lots of time,
Yeah.
but don't wait.
Yeah, I mean, if you're watching this at this point in the video, you should just go click the Kickstarter link. It's right below this.
Hopefully they already did.
Yeah.
So no, and I appreciate the chance to come on and talk to people about this. If people have questions, I think you can back the Kickstarter at $1 or something, and if you do that, you can add comments to the Kickstarter page. I get a notice every time somebody adds a new comment. I get an email, and if it's one that I can answer, I will. But if it's questions about fulfillment or whatever, other people will be able to answer those. So if there are questions, that's the best way to do it. Just or you can also email somebody at FrogGod. If you go to their website, froggodgames.com, you can email and you'll get an answer there too. So we want people to be happy. We want people to really enjoy this thing.
And I'm sure people will.
I hope so.
Well, Mark, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, it's been great. I appreciate it. Wish I'd thought to bring a pet on. Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. I've got enough cute for the whole class.
Absolutely. Very cute.
Say hi to the camera, Canyon. No, it's not happening. All right. Well, I believe that's it for us. So, yeah.
All right.
Thanks again for coming on and for
Thank you.
watching. Yeah.
All right.
Have a good night, everybody.
All right. Bye.